Welcome to the show about all things making music, from the creative process and workflow to gear and recording techniques. I'm your host, Brian Funk, musician, producer, Ableton certified trainer, and author of the 5-Minute Music Producer. Let's learn to become better music makers. Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. Today's guest is film and television composer Andrew Lockington. Andrew composed the scores for many films, including blockbuster hits City of Ember, Percy Jackson's Sea of Monsters, San Andreas, and Rampage, as well as television shows like Mayor of Kingstown, Special Ops Lioness, and his latest, LANDMAN, starring Billy Bob Thornton. He also created the opening theme for Amazon Prime's Monday Night Hockey. Andrew's work is known for its creativity and attention to detail, and we spoke about some of those techniques, like how he recorded in a prison for Mayor of Kingstown and used its gates, walls, and bars as musical instruments. Andrew explains how this kind of extra effort can help us bring out the emotional impact in our work. Please welcome Andrew Lockington to the Music Production Podcast. February 21st through 23rd, 2025, I'm taking over Ableton's Pasadena headquarters to host a very special in-person music-making workshop, and you're invited. It's the Finish February Workshop Retreat, and it's open to just 15 people. We're going to spend 3 days bringing your songs from ideas to completion. I'm going to help you finish your music using the techniques and strategies I've learned in my 3 decades of music making and the skills I've discovered speaking with music professionals on nearly 400 episodes of the Music Production Podcast. You'll participate in lessons, activities, and exercises I've developed over my nearly 20 years of teaching experience and 11 years as an Ableton certified trainer teaching music production for Berklee Online. You're going to get personalized one-on-one feedback and constructive advice from me and the other workshop attendees, and we'll meet and learn in small group and individual settings to ensure you get specific feedback and help with your music throughout the entire process. You're going to have the time and support to work on your music so you can leave with finished tracks. Plus, you'll be hanging out at the Ableton Pasadena, California headquarters and have access to Ableton's Push 3 and Move to make music with. And you can take advantage of Ableton's exclusive in-person 20% off hardware and software offers and up to 30% off Push 3 when you trade in your old Push. I'm also going to give you a physical copy of my book, The 5-Minute Music Producer, and a collection of my premium Ableton Live packs. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited, and we're going to get a lot of work done. Space is extremely limited to ensure high-quality, personalized attention. Learn more and sign up at brianfunk.com/workshop, and I'll see you in February. Andrew, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure, and you've got a lot of really cool things happening right now at this very moment as we record. LANDMAN just started on Paramount. Your Amazon Prime Monday Night Hockey theme song is live, and I just saw the Lioness soundtrack was released today on Apple Music when I was going through your stuff. So congratulations. That's another bunch of items to an already really impressive body of work.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really funny that you work on all this stuff for a year and it all comes out at the same time. It's funny how that happens. There's no spacing everything out. It just all is kind of being born in the same 2 weeks. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been a great year. I've had a lot of fun working on a lot of different projects, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
And it's a lot of different styles too. When I listen to the hockey theme, very epic, orchestral. And just before we started talking, my wife and I got to see the first episode of LANDMAN, and much different. Organic, guitars, and really fits the vibe of the film, or I guess TV show in this case. But
it's a blurry line these days, isn't it, between film and TV, in a good way.
Yeah,
but thank
it
you.
feels
Yeah.
like a film, yeah.
Yeah, it's I certainly feel I approach it like film. So yeah, it feels like I had a director say to me that they're series, they're not TV series. Mm-hmm. So it's much more of a 10-hour movie than it is 10 one-hour TV shows. But yeah, style-wise, thank God they're different, because it's when you're working on multiple things at once, you need some delineation between them so your brain doesn't get confused. And I was lucky that these all called for very different approaches. So I was able to avoid crossing wires in my head in terms of themes and styles and approach.
And I'm guessing each project has a bit of a palette that you get to draw from. What's that process like for you coming up with these sound palettes to fit? Because, you know, I think part of your job is to fade a little bit in the background so that we get absorbed into the music, into the show, into the emotions that are going on. And the sounds you choose are very important in setting the stage and the mood and the time period, even. How does that process work for you? Where do you begin? Is it a lot of direction from others or experimentation?
It depends on the project, but in the case of working with Taylor Sheridan, it's a lot of collaboration and brainstorming and
Mm.
trial and error. Um, that it's an interesting way to put it, setting the palette, because it is really what you're doing. You're trying to come up with what is the tone of the music and what is the instrument, more specifically, what instruments will you use, but also what role will the music play? What is it trying
Mm.
to say or not say in the show? And that brainstorming and really, as you said, coming up with the palette is both the best and the worst part of the process. It's incredibly rewarding, but it's also it's like being thrown in a maze without any clues of how to get out. And so it's in some ways it's on purpose. You try to sort of put yourself in a situation that's unfamiliar and use your musicality and the tools you have to find your way in uncharted territory, so to speak. But so in that sense, it can be really rewarding, and the payoff is rewarding. But it's very much like being in the middle of a math problem that you don't know how to solve. So yeah, and in the case of Landman, more than the other two shows I did with Taylor, we really went full circle. We did a lot of brainstorming, a lot of experimentation to come up with what in the end was a really simple palette and a really simple idea. But
Mm.
it's funny. I can't have to look this up because I keep referencing this quote, but it's some quote where they talk about journeying the world and coming back to where you started, where you grew up, and seeing it for the first time.
Mm.
And we very much did that with the music. We started in this place of really simple melodies and simple instrumentation and all the little sounds of the human playing the instrument, not just the sound of the instrument. And we tried all these other ideas and ultimately came back to this original idea of really just a guitar and humming and embracing the imperfection of communicating an emotional idea without overproducing it.
Mm. I've had that experience actually in real life, traveling the world. Went to Europe on my honeymoon with my wife,
Mm.
only to come back home. I live on Long Island, New York, and we were like, wow, like we went to all these different countries. We got the ocean here. We have the city not too far away. The mountains are pretty close. So we kind of saw it differently after that. But I've had that with music as well, where you think you might write the song on an acoustic guitar, try it out with the band, or try it out in a different kind of genre, and then find out, you know what, like there was something kind of cool about where we started. And those
Yeah.
instincts come out, I guess. It shows you the power of that instinctual.
So being a musician, then you also know sometimes there can be a great song on the radio, and you sit down and you strip it down into acoustic guitar and vocal, and it's missing the magic.
Hmm.
It's almost like it's been produced so well that they didn't have to start with the framework being super strong because they could mask it all in this not overproduction, but fantastic production. And I remember years ago hearing a Katy Perry song, I think it was Teenage Dream. And it was an acoustic cover that a band called The Rescues had done of it. And I
Hmm.
remember thinking, I had no idea how good this song was. until I heard it with all of that stripped away down to its simplest form. And in the case of Landman, Taylor actually would say to me, "Okay, I like this. What does it sound like? Just you playing guitar and humming it."
Mm.
And and that was the test, the gauntlet. We'd have to put all these ideas through to see, is it real, or are we masking all the bad parts of this melody? And I almost said masking all the imperfections, but in fact, we kind of came to realize there was a bit of a measure that if it had imperfections, but they were musical ones, that was a good thing. That, if there was a breath, or, there's one of the themes, I remember taking a breath in right before. So the melody didn't start on beat one when it should have, but it was almost like just a hair, like a 16th or an eighth late. But that was what made it great. That was the magic. And the minute you
Mm.
perfected it and put it on the grid and quantized it, it didn't work in the same way. So it was very much kind of trying to embrace all the little rough edges that make us human. And it's only in kind of looking back on it and being out of the battle that I see that was there all along in the writing and the acting. Billy Bob Thornton's character is far from perfect, but it's all those little imperfections that make him perfect, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah, it's from the first episode I've seen anyway, like he is really just he's a dad, and he's he's in this big business. He's talking about trillions of dollars at different points, but he's just a dad, and there's a lot of scenes where you see him really just humanized in that way, where he sees his daughter with the kind of like fancy boyfriend that's sort of taking advantage of her a little bit, and um, juxtaposed to this like opening scene where he's so powerful, even though he's tied up, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
and that it takes that the kind of like fantasy out of it. It makes you say like, yeah, he's like a person like me, and I'm also flawed like that. And I think you reflect that really nicely with the music. And these days, when it's so easy to, like you said, just take that one line, it was supposed to be on the one. Let's just shift it over there and get it where it belongs. But to notice that, I guess that's what you mean by not washing away all that like human aspect of it.
Yeah, and in finding the beauty between the unintended brushstrokes, I guess,
Mm,
the little things that you didn't, like sitting at the piano and I played this chord, but the one middle note in the chord just barely sounded. But that's good. Like that's what
yeah.
made the chord sound good, and I have to give credit to Taylor and to the fact that we've gone through this process for 3 or 4 years with the two other shows, that I I trusted him enough to throw those things at him, and I guess he trusted me enough not to worry about saying no, 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 keep it. Like, and it's funny. I remember saying to my assistant, I was like, "Oh, there's this thing I played, and it was imperfect." And Taylor said, "No, he likes it. He likes how it
Mm,
sounds. Like it sounds real and authentic." And like I forget what he said. It was I was playing a nickel harpa, which is like a keyed medieval fiddle, mainly from Sweden and that area of the world 500 years ago. But it's featured in the score, and I don't play it well. And I had played this line, and Taylor said to me, he said, "Oh, it kind of sounds like it's crying, and it kind of sounds insecure." And I'm thinking, well, it's insecure because I'm incredibly insecure about playing it.
mm,
But there was a humanity to it, and my assistant was like, "Really? Can't you convince him to let you re-record it, or we'll get another player in?" And I said, "I know that's what I thought too, but actually in the scene, it kind of makes sense. Like it kind of works." So it's good I feel really lucky to collaborate with people you trust who can help you find the magical moments and things that you might have overlooked, or you might have erased the sketch thinking it was bad, but they're able to kind of help you see the path in going in that direction. And as you mentioned, the NHL theme, totally different approach to music. You're trying to be perfect. You want it to be incredibly musically sound and exact. And this was a complete 180 departure from that.
Mm. There's so much vulnerability in that, right? And like you said, to have collaborators that you can feel safe with and trust. And when we bear emotion, I think we always get a little uncomfortable because we're revealing something true about ourselves. And in our playing, sometimes the truth is, yeah, I rushed it, I got excited, or I missed the note a little bit, or the instrument kind of creaked in a certain way. But that is life, and that's when you're trying to show the case that, like, I think especially in a show like that, it's especially clever to leave that stuff in to
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting too, for songwriters out there. When you write a lyric and sing it, if you're writing about heartbreak and singing about heartbreak, and you're actually feeling heartbroken when you're singing it, there's this thing. There's something within this performance that you can't quantify into numbers or production or anything, that if you capture it, if that person plays heartbreak or sings heartbreak with the moment they're feeling heartbreak, it has a different quality than them
mm,
being in Wembley Stadium 3 years later re-singing their hit about heartbreak.
mhm,
So a lot of this score was about capturing that moment. In the moment you felt it, and it was, a lot of recording everything, sitting down and playing an idea and recording it because you didn't know if it would be the moment or not. Um,
mhm,
and a lot of it, I'm from Canada. I live in Toronto. I'm talking to you from Toronto, my home in Toronto right now. I had not spent a lot of time in Texas before I met Taylor, but much like the characters in his show, some of the most authentic, real, say what you mean and, you know, mean what you say people are
hmm,
from Texas. And it's reflected too, I think, very accurately in this show. And there's no posturing, there's no pretending to be somebody else. It's just people that are very honest with themselves. And so the music really had to be that too. It had to be unapologetic about its imperfections, but confident in its presentation.
right. I think that's so important, and I get the feeling that, and I hope this too. So I have this wish that this happens with music in general. But as it's gotten so slick and polished, as we've had our DAWs and we can fix everything perfectly, I think there's been that trend. But now I'm seeing more things, even in just the way the software is designed. There's things like probability or humanize or plugins that kind of warp the tuning a little bit. I think there's this desire to have that back because we've sort of found out that we were striving for perfection and we couldn't quite get there. And that's where kind of the humanity lies. But now that we can actually put it in there, we say, hey, wait a minute. We've taken something out of here that's really important to our expression.
Well, if you go back and listen to the Beatles through the discerning ear of modern day production,
Mm,
it's flawed in so many ways in terms of tuning, timing, so many things. EQ, there's so many elements to it that by our measurements today it doesn't measure up. And yet it's still the pinnacle for what we're all striving to achieve.
right.
So it's the calamity of errors that make it great. And it's a great lesson to kind of go, wow, we should strive for that. Like, I would be fascinated if, I mean, maybe it's an experiment somebody will run someday, but take the multi tracks from a Beatles song, very famous Beatles song, and give it to an engineer and say, produce it, present day. Would it be as great? How would it sound if, Paul McCartney was perfectly in tune and actually sang it 70 takes and they took a word from this take and a word from that take, and would it have the same effect? I don't know. I know from my experience, a lot of times when I was in a band and we would do the bed tracks and then go down and lay the multi-tracking, we'd often go back to the rough bed track and go, damn, that's better.
Yeah.
And it wasn't technically perfect, but it captured a moment in time that felt more real than us all individually going and laying over our parts.
I get that with my band a lot. We do a demo. Within the last month, this has happened where I've recorded the vocals again, and then one of the guys in the band's like, listen to the original, the way this happened. And I'm like, not even really saying words yet. I'm just kind of blabbering stuff out. And I hear what he's saying, but it's like, we just have to sort of accept this is something different that's going to happen. I'm pretty sure I know how I'd feel about those re-engineered Beatles recordings.
Oh man, me too. Me too.
Yeah. I did an experiment not that long ago where I wanted to see song structures very visually. So I would drop famous songs I loved, well-written songs into my DAW, and then just make MIDI clips above it. So just blocks. This is red for the verse. This is blue for the chorus. And when I got to some of the Beatles songs, as far as the BPM goes, when I get to the end of the track, like it doesn't line up anymore. It was really amazing how much they fluctuated, sometimes like 10 beats per minute in a 2.5 minute songs. But you wouldn't change it. Then I, of course, like play around with it and I adjust the timing so it's perfect. And you're just like, oh my God, this is so off.
Yeah, it's amazing how the small, like the butterfly flaps its wings and it's not the same experience.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool to do that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting just to see visually the way the songs are laid out, but then just to see like, I consider Ringo my favorite drummer. So, he can do no wrong pretty much by me. And watching him like speed up and slow down so drastically was an eye opener,
And
especially
break
when,
all the rules, right? Like he's breaking
yeah.
so many rules. And is it Yesterday? There's one of the songs I saw recently, an interview with Paul McCartney, and he was saying that they started the take and he didn't realize Ringo had gone to the washroom. And
Mhm.
so there's no drums, and he's thinking there's no drums yet. And then he sees as he's singing Ringo, going sleeking back to his drum set, and then he just starts playing. And it's like
Yeah.
musically perfection, but you never would have thought of doing that on purpose. It's just embracing the happy accident.
Right. I saw that clip. I forget what song it was too, but something where yeah, he doesn't come in right away.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it turns out when he makes it there, it's actually the perfect time for him to come in.
It's perfect. I know.
Something I've been enjoying about your work and looking into how you're doing it kind of reminded me of the Beatles a little bit, just in that they were so experimental with recording. And now here you are today experimenting with the locations.
Hmm.
So I didn't see footage of this, but I did read jungles of Papua New Guinea are places you've done recordings in the tropics of Costa Rica. And I saw another clip, believe it was on your Instagram, talking about performing the parts in a jail cell
Mm-hmm.
for one of the shows. And look, like in today's day and age, there are certainly plugins you could get. There's certainly studio trickery you could do to emulate that kind of stuff. But I really appreciated the fact that you went the extra mile, literally lots of miles in some cases, to do that. And I kind of just wanted to see how you rationalize that. I personally, I get it 100%, but I could also imagine that maybe like studios and budgets might say like, why are we going in the jungle for this?
Um, I'm happy to report that more often than not, they love it. They love the idea of doing something different like that. Music is one of those things that everybody is kind of an expert on. Everyone, like, I can't sit here and talk about different types of cinematography or lighting or film editing, or all these other roles, key roles. But when it comes to music, everyone has a relationship with music. They know what they like, they know what they don't like, and they have an opinion of what works and what doesn't work. So in my experience, anyways, with a lot of these out of left field ideas, people are excited by them. And they're also, we're at a time where I think people are really excited about doing something new and different and pushing the envelope in music. I think all kinds of music actually fall into that. Whereas I've lived through time periods where they would temp a movie with a score and say, we want it to sound like this. Not don't copy it, but we want it to be this type of score, this instrumentation, this vibe, achieve exactly what this is doing. So I've actually had a lot of support from the filmmakers and from the studios in experimenting with that kind of stuff. And you're right. In some cases, you could mimic it for sure. Like in terms of the jail cell, could we have come up with a really long reverb that had mimicked the stone walls of this 4-story prison that was built 200 years ago? 100% could have created something. But two interesting things. One, as good as these reverbs are, they don't actually combine the sounds in the room before you hit the reverb. So a lot of times you've got, 4 percussionists close mic'd, and you take those close mic sounds, all put them through the reverb, and we get an echoey sound. You take those 4 instruments and they combine in the room and naturally hit the reverb in slightly different locations, slightly different timing. There's something different about that. And I don't think you can always put a conscious, like a number on what's different, or even consciously know what's different. But back to what we were talking about, this authenticity and this truth in music, I think you can get that. Now that prison in particular, we showed up, we were a couple of days, it was during COVID. So we all had our masks on, and it was a big deal to get permission to go into this prison. It was Mayor of Kingstown, so the Jeremy Renner starring show that Taylor Sheridan wrote. And it was actually the first time I'd worked with Taylor. And brought in these musicians and myself. My daughter had to come along, my teenage daughter, because of COVID, so they didn't want too many people. So she thankfully assisted. And the plan, I'd written out all this music to play, and we brought in all these drums and all these instruments. And I think we were doing 4 sessions, and maybe an hour into the first session of the morning of the first day, I honestly can't remember if it was me or one of the drummers. Somebody hit the wall, like just playing the rhythm, and took the mallet, hit the wall. And the wall's like this gate of metal that's like 100 years old, and it's rattly and connected to something. And the whole, like, we were like, doo, 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 and the whole room just echoed. And it was like a wave where you hit the metal, and the wave, you could visualize the wave going up and around us and down the other side. And we were like, damn, that's cool. And the whole thing turned into us playing the prison. We abandoned the instruments, and it turned into taking mallets and bows, like a string bow that you'd play on a cello, and bowing the door and slamming the door, closing the prison door really slowly because the hinge goes and plays this melody, and putting on our heavy boots because it was cold outside, and stomping down the hall in a rhythm. And we kind of, by being there, we realized, damn, the prison is the instrument, and let's play the prison in the only way that the prisoners could have played the prison. They didn't have drums. They didn't have all these instruments. Let's play it like they would have played it. And the whole score did this whole left turn in this whole different direction. And it completely informed everything that we did from that point on. So even though that hadn't been the intention, if they hadn't let us do it and we
Mm.
just mimicked it, we never would have gone that way.
Yeah, wow. So I was going to ask you if just being in that room with the reverb informed the players, because it always does wherever you play it, it affects your playing. But it just, I mean, it really did in this case. You just threw the instruments away.
So being in that room for sure affected us, because I remember
Mm.
my daughter went out and got us lunch. So there was nothing. It was COVID. There's nothing open. So she goes out in the car and gets, I think it was Subway or sandwiches or something. And we all walked out and stood outside and realized how oppressed we'd been being in this dark, damp, gothic space.
Mm.
I've never cheated on my taxes. I never will. I know what it's like to be in that penitentiary. I don't want to ever be there where I can't walk out on break. So it was, certainly from an approach standpoint, that also influenced the score, like getting a sense
Yeah.
of how oppressive it was. And the other interesting thing about that, and part of the reason I wanted to go and record in the prison, was I did some research on it. It's one of the oldest prisons in Canada where they were filming. Incidentally, they were filming there like the next week. They hadn't started filming yet. So I managed to get in there before they built the sets, before all the actors showed up.
Mm-hmm.
And what Taylor and I kind of discussed in the idea was that the most violent prison riot in Canadian history had taken place in that prison. And the prison riot was instigated by the fact that there was a bell in the guard gate that would get rung periodically throughout the day. It would signify morning, night, meals, yard time. And it was so loud and so oppressive because of the design of this prison being all stone and metal. Like you can imagine the echo that would happen
Mm-hmm.
with this incredibly loud bell. And the prisoners felt so oppressed by this sound. Like it was almost like a sonic torture, that the goal of the riot was to actually destroy the bell. They broke into the guard station and they shattered the bell. And it's not a museum, but they actually have in the decommissioned prison now, behind glass, the broken pieces of the bell, sort of demonstrating what their whole goal was. And people died solely so they
Mm.
could destroy this sonic, oppressive thing that symbolized to them taking their freedom away. So Taylor said to me, there's something to that musically, that even though this show is about Jeremy Renner's character who's been there and he's now outside and working on behalf of the prisoners and the guards and the police and trying to keep the peace, if his music has that oppressive reverb on it, he's still
Mm.
there in his head, and it's permeated his psyche in such a way that he's out of prison, but he'll never escape the prison. So all of these things, in addition to being sonic Easter eggs, and they also kind of shape your approach and what is the music supposed to be doing. And in this case, just having that experience, it was like, wow, the music is supposed to make us feel like he's still there.
Mm-hmm. The way memories sort of reverberate in our minds.
Yeah,
Just
100%.
like, yeah. That's really cool. And wow, isn't it interesting how a little bit of time and now it's sort of like on display as this, piece of history where I'm sure in the moment you said people died, terrifying. And
Yeah. Yeah. The other, just as a little sidebar, the other incredible thing there was the artwork that the prisoners in the
mm,
200 years the prison had been open had carved into the walls, was extraordinary. It was,
mm,
and quite emotionally conflicting, because you recognize they were there for a reason. They'd done something terrible, but they're suffering, and
mm,
you could see that reflected in the artwork. So yeah, it's definitely it was a not only musically eye-opening experience, but just a life eye-opening experience, and something that that made me look at the show in a different way.
Mm. Yeah, you see the humanity in those people. They are still humans despite, whatever they did or went through.
Yeah, and I
It's,
think I've actually carried that into other projects too. Is exactly what you said. Finding the humanity in someone that you otherwise might write off.
mm,
You might say, "I have nothing in common with this person," um, and using the music to hopefully give your audience something that they could say, "Oh, I do relate with them on this point," or
mm.
I know how that feels," even though they might, have so many other reasons to disassociate with that person and their way of life.
And that's great storytelling when that happens in a villain. When the villain just, I'm evil, or let me do bad things, that's not much to connect with. But when you get the backstory and you understand their motivations, and there's a part of you that's can imagine how you could have gotten there too if you were in their same shoes going through that, it makes it much more complex and more compelling to watch them go through that.
Yeah, 100%.
Mhm. It's really cool that you did that because again, like it's so easy to where you could stay in this comfortable studio, we don't have to go to jail literally and
Well, it
do
was
that.
COVID, so we were pretty tired of being locked
So
in.
tired
So
of that. Okay.
having a field trip was really exciting at that point.
I think those kind of stories are really important in art these days. These adventures, the extra mile you go to take those risks, because you could have very well gone into that jail, tried to record these drums, and it's just overwhelming reverb. We really can't use it, and there's a risk to that. But having that extra layer of story, that adventure you guys went into, again, it's like one of these things that maybe you can't put your finger on. There's no dial for it. But I think it comes through in those final products. And in our world, where if you're thinking about what like AI can do with stuff and computer generated everything, it's really nice to have these stories of like how we got that sound. Oh yeah, well, I got how that sound in there. I just finished a song kind of dedicated to my dog that passed away not too long ago.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's been a year and a half, but it's still tough. But one of the melodic sounds was made from like her bark, kind
Hmm.
of sampled it and turned it into a melodic instrument. And you probably wouldn't know if you heard it. You just think it's like some kind of weird synthesizer sound. But I really do think it puts something in there. And just like this, when you're there, when you're in that building, and then that's being used to inform this character's history that's with them. It, it's it's all these little things that brings the art. It brings the art to the project, and it's really cool to know like people are willing to do that. And I love that the studios are supportive. So nice to hear.
Yeah, and to your point that people won't know, sometimes that's good. They don't know. Because if they recognize the way you're using something, then maybe the message isn't coming through clearly enough out the other side. Because
Mm,
ultimately, you just want them to get the emotion, like your
mm-hmm,
song in particular. You want them to feel the emotion of how you feel about
mm,
your poor dog passing away. You don't want
mm,
them to concentrate on how you're transmitting that emotion. I think about this a lot and I've referenced this a lot, but if you think about like FM radio or AM radio and the sound wave and being a carrier wave for information. I think a lot of music you really want as much information to get from one side to the other as possible with as little degradation, with as little being aware of how it's being communicated. It's just a carrier wave that you want to kind of be silent.
mm,
So I think a lot of times when I go to the prison or Papua New Guinea or these different places to try to do things, I'm trying to create something that hopefully the method I got it is fairly invisible, And it's a fun thing to talk about after the fact. But if the emotion, if I don't achieve what I want in the emotion, then you kind of have to abandon it and go, well, I'm not doing it for a good story. I'm doing it to better the storytelling or the experience of the show I'm scoring. And that can be really hard sometimes, because you can sometimes have a really good idea on paper that doesn't work, and you kind of have to abandon it and let it go. But yeah, I had this dispute with an actor friend of mine. Her husband is a director, and he said, you really just want people to like the score as a composer. You don't, you're not worried about how they feel about the show. And most composers, and I was like, you don't get it. Like I love if people like the score, but if they like the film overall and they don't differentiate the visuals and the acting and the music, I'm actually more flattered, because I've done a better job than if the
Mm.
music doesn't match the film, but the music you like, if that makes sense. So
Mm.
yeah, the all of these little journeys and these methods of creating something, you almost want them to be invisible in the end, so that as long as it's achieving the end goal of making it more profound and more powerful.
Right, because you're creating a spell. It's almost a form of hypnosis where we go in, we watch the show, and we forgot about everything. And I got that watching Landman today. I kept reminding myself, I got to listen to the music more. I
Mm.
got to pay a little more attention to this. And it's kind of like that in music. You don't want to be distracted in the how to. You don't want that to pop in too much. You don't want the fact that we're watching a film to keep popping into your head and like, oh, they're doing something really cool here with the cameras or with the sound or the actors doing something very special. Because when that happens, now I'm not in that moment. The spell's broken, and there goes that emotional impact, which I guess is really the thing we're all trying to get. That's tends to be what I try to think about when I'm making music is I don't care how I get it. If it enhances emotional impact, it's the answer.
100%. And going back to the humanity side, there were a couple of moments and phrases in the strings in Landman where it repeats. And I had somebody say to me, one of the engineers say, oh, we should take that first phrase and put it over the second phrase, because the orchestra was a little more together here.
Mm.
And I thought, no, the fact that they're not perfect is kind of what's perfect about it. Like the fact that even though technically, and on the manuscript paper, those look like the same two phrases, they weren't. One of them, they'd already played it once. So there's these little imperfections and little truths, I guess, that end up being really important parts of the music. And I guess, going back to the Beatles, they had that mastered. They recognize not to eliminate those things, not to self-edit to a point that it would take all the little imperfections that made it perfect out of it.
Mm. You can hear those all over those recordings. You might even hear a little bit of some kind of calling out before the change, hidden probably within those drum tracks or something. And it only happens in that second verse right before the second chorus. And it's just a little treat you get along the way.
Exactly. And in orchestral music, sometimes you'll catch the sound of the conductor turning their page.
Mm.
And I've run into so many engineers that say, we can get rid of that. And I'm like, no, that's the proof we were here.
Yeah. Right.
That's, only very few people will know what sound that is, but the people that recognize it will appreciate it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. This is it's like writing I was here on
Yeah,
the wall.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I've done that with sounds that I get while I'm recording. I'm so much less uptight about if there's noise. I'm in my basement studio here, so there's nothing perfect about it.
It
I've
looks
done
pretty
the best
cool,
I can.
actually. It looks a lot more
Thanks.
impressive than mine.
Well, I do conveniently have the washer and dryer out of the frame here. So there's things going on. But if you get too caught up in that, it kills your performance. Because again, now I'm not in the moment. I'm thinking about like, is there a car driving down the street or all these things you can't control. But a lot of times when I listen back to the things that have these little interferences in there, it puts me in the moment. I remember where I was, and it just feels more like life is happening instead of this kind of weird sterile environment that is the DAW at negative infinity volume, where there's absolutely no sound that just doesn't exist anywhere in the world. To have that little bit of life in there.
Oh, for sure. I had years ago, there was a vocalist that I still work with her, actually, Emily Claire Barlow. And she was singing on a score, and I had her into the studio a bunch of times. And my room was small, and I had put all my acoustic guitars up on the wall, displaying them proudly. And she would sing in the room beside me into the mic. And she is incredible. She's got an incredible voice, and there's a magical aspect to her voice already.
Mm.
But on the third session on that film that she came in, my guitars were all with the guitar technician being tweaked and the action lowered and new strings, etc. And we kind of looked at each other and thought, oh, there's something missing. And I
Mm.
realized we've been getting the sympathetic sounds on all those strings right behind, like almost this melodic reverb behind her every other time she sang, because they were literally 3 feet behind her and the
Hmm.
mic was picking it up and we didn't even realize it. So I was quick to redo that last session with all those guitars back there again and realized, wow, this is another example of where the limitation ends up being an advantage, not a disadvantage.
Yeah, you're not supposed to have that. That's wrong technically.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, but that it does. I know that I have an acoustic guitar on the wall next to an amplifier, and I've been recording guitars before and been like, wait, what? Is there reverb on this amp? Like, what's going on here? Only to
It-
find it's just kind of bouncing around inside there.
oh, it can be the best thing.
Mm.
I've done things with orchestras where I'll put the piano next to the double basses and mic it really close.
Mm.
And the piano player, their only job is to hold down the sustain pedal.
Right. Just let those
And then the
strings
double
go.
basses get these sympathetic pitches going in the piano, and then you just gain it up, and you get this incredible
Hmm.
echo, really, in the piano strings. It's really cool.
Yeah, almost like a spring reverb, kind of, but it's tuned, I guess.
Exactly, but it's
Yeah.
pitched, which is the
Mm.
best. Yeah, it's the best part.
You give me an idea. I'm gonna put a mic on that guitar next time I'm recording an electric guitar, just to let it. I mean, even the drums probably. I spend so much time trying to deaden the drums, so I don't get that. But maybe for the sake of a reverb, it might be cool to get the floor toms
Could be cool. Could be cool. And you know
rumble
what? Even further, custom tune the strings so they're all open and in the
in the
pitches you
key of the
want.
song. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's a great idea. Yeah, so fun. And those are the kinds of things, again, that would be a little extra effort, and you could probably just slap, your favorite reverb on there. But I think if anything, if nothing else, it would give me a certain enthusiasm to the project that would probably carry over into the performances. And I guess if that works, then, you win. Because that's, as you were saying, you want to have those emotions in the moment of the performance come
And some
through.
of the best things in music are accidents. When you're
Mm.
writing, when I'm writing, some of my best moments are a mistake that I take notice of and realize I didn't mean to play it that way, but that's better.
Hmm.
So I think, I'd say in my recording production side of things, um, some of the best things were accidents that I just
Hmm.
realized, you're almost sheepish about telling the engineer at Abbey Road that you did it this way, but they actually like it. And
Yeah,
they're sheepish about saying, well, you're not supposed to do it like that, but it's pretty good.
that's cool. Yeah, I can imagine. There's certainly funny things I've done where maybe left a mic on that shouldn't have been on and then been like, "Mm, okay." Let's.
I did a score and we were trying to make it sound like an old 40s rom-com. And we had the orchestra mic'd, and I was trying to get that sound and I couldn't figure out the sound. So we had a little crappy mic set up for the conductor to be able to talk to us. So
Mhm.
once we do a take, the engineer would turn down the tree and all the surround mics and all the close mics, and we'd just hear the mic for the conductor. So the next take, he went and he accidentally left that mic open, the mono mic, right by the conductor's baton. And I said, "That's it. That's the sound we want.
Mm.
That's exactly it. What'd you do?" And he said, "Oh, I screwed up. I kept that open." And I said, "Okay,
Yeah.
that we need to record that."
Mm.
And he said, "So we're going to disregard the 32 microphones we have that, through these incredible mic pre's, and we're going to use the $100 mic that is like a Tom mic or something,
Mm.
like." And I said, "Well, we'll record both just in case." But again, an accident, and you realize, oh, that's the sound we wanted.
Mm.
So yeah, those are the best moments when you suddenly realize, oh, this total screw up was actually the answer to all of our problems.
I love that too. And that's probably how they were recording things back then for orchestras anyways. Single mic, just get it in the right spot where we can hear stuff. And
Exactly,
what
right
else are
where
we
the
going to do?
conductor is standing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I love when you realize it doesn't take all of that stuff, like those expensive mics and those top end preamps with the engineer, getting everything perfect. And just, you can still make magic with pure simplicity.
Well, it still comes down to the music,
Mm.
and I had someone say to me once, I said, "Oh, I really want to buy this new mixer, this new digital console. It's so cool." And he said, "Oh yeah, that's great. Will it make your music sound better?" I
Mm.
said, "No, but it'll look good and it'll make life a bit easier." And he's like, "Yeah, that's right. But will it make anything sound better?" And I thought, no. And I've kind of used that to measure everything now. And you realize, there's a lot of hits recorded on a laptop in somebody's basement, and with
Yeah.
Radio Shack microphones, and it still comes down to the music. And you can have the
Hmm.
best mics and the best preamps in the world. If the music and the performance isn't good, then, you're not there.
Yeah. That's some of the beauty of where we are today, that you can have that. I mean, look at Billie Eilish and Phineas, what they do, sitting on the floor of their childhood bedroom. It's just, I mean, I think that I don't know if I want to hear him anywhere else. There's
Yeah,
something special as brother and sister. That's that comes through.
I think
How do
so too.
you get that comfortable? It's a little bit uptight in the studio. It's serious business. The clock is running and the dollars are flying away. So you get in a kind of mindset that can prevent some of those like vulnerable moments to happen.
Agreed, 100%.
I gotta say, I'm really enjoying your outlook and what you're bringing to these shows and to these films. That it really does take it someplace special, I think. And it's also very interesting how intangible it is, but you feel it,
Hmm.
which is the opposite of intangible. But it's something real there that I think is important for us to have in our music, and I think music in general could use more of that direction. It's really nice work.
Well, thank you. It's interesting. I know every interview, every podcast in every genre, every um, occupation could talk about AI right now because it's such at the forefront. But I have to say that music has something that, when it's done right and when it's really honest, I don't think you can break it down into numbers and code. I think there's
Mm.
a humanity that we can't understand. We can't put it into an equation or ones and zeros, and I don't think anything can. I
Mm.
and it's funny on Mayor again. There's a piano theme, and I had written maybe 4 or 5 different piano melody ideas, and was sending them to Taylor later that day. And I got news that a friend that I'd gone to university with, who I'd been really close with, but lost touch with in recent years, had passed away. Total shock.
Mm.
It was one of those things where, oh, you didn't know he passed away 6 months ago? And I was just thrown. And not thinking about the project, I went and I sat down at the piano and I wrote just a one-hand melody motif. I put it with the other 5 one-hand melody motifs, MP3s, sent them to Taylor. And that night he's like, okay, so they're all good. What's with that one? What is with that one? What was going on when you wrote that?
Mm.
And I couldn't put it, I couldn't ever have imagined that someone could pick those out of a lineup and say that one's real.
Mm.
But he did. And on paper or on the Disney ride, they were all emotional and moving in, or trying to be moving in that way. But this one had this undescribable truth to it that he knew right away.
Mm.
And I often think about that because you can't find that in the code of the music. You can't find that, you can't pull that out. So I think it's really set me on a quest to try to make sure that I'm writing from a very personal place, something real. Like I can only imagine that, and I'd love to hear this piece you wrote, because I can imagine that there's an emotion to that is incomparable to other things you've written, and very unique in its message, because it
Mm.
is very true to what you're writing it about. But I'm always trying to think about what is that sound, and how can I best communicate that. So it was sort of an epiphany for me, and a new moment where I realized, wow, someone can hear that, someone can pick that up.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially with a bunch of others to compare it to, and there's also that specific goal for the project you're working on. It's like these microphones are picking up more than just those sounds and those particular frequencies. And if you look at the, microphone frequency ranges, like there's seems like there's something else going on there, maybe a third dimension that's not represented in the charts, but
God,
something
I
gets in
hope
the
so.
air.
I hope so. Because that's kind of I think that's the drug that we all get off on in music, is when all these little things combine into something magical, and you can't put your finger on how it happened, and you can't recreate it. It's moving and it's cool, and it just happens. And,
Mm.
I hear songwriters say that these things are floating around in the ether and they show up, but it's not just the thing, it's the moment that they show up that has a magic
Mm.
too, that you kind of want to capture.
Yeah. I think about that a lot when I don't feel like doing it, when I have time, and I know I should probably be working on some music. And um, I think about those things. Like if you don't show up at that time, like you're never there. It's like the old, you can never step in the same river twice because the river's always changing, and so are you.
Right.
So you're never in that moment. And I, I also saw the Dolly Parton kind of biography that came out not too long ago, and they said she wrote Jolene and I Will Always Love You in the same day.
Oh my gosh.
I was just like, what? What kind of like lightning was striking that day? That like I believe that that doesn't come to you the next day. I think every day you're getting something different. Just from my experience of doing this, I just know that like sometimes the things that pop out of me like are just because it was that moment. Maybe it was even the people I was around or what I just had done an hour before, but there's a lot of weird factors that we can't quite collect data on and feed into some kind of algorithm.
So how often have you in your life been lying in bed and then woken up in the middle of the night lying in bed and you come up with a song or a melody and you half the time you get out of bed and you go and you write it down or you record it, just a voice
Yeah.
memo or something. And the other half you don't,
Yep.
thinking, oh, I'll remember this. You never remember
You
it.
never remember it. No.
And when
That's
you wake up, when I wake up in the morning and the 50% of the time that I did get up and record it, half of that, it's amazing. And I'm so glad I got up. And the other half, it's terrible. And I was obviously having some weird dream that made me think it was good, but it's really bad. So it's funny how that works out. But yeah, I agree. There's something going on that music's a bit of a window into something else.
I think if nothing else, you wind up with an amusing recording, and there's a music is great for that too. I mean, sometimes it's just fun, it's silly, and it takes you to that moment that would otherwise just be erased from history and your existence.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's amazing that we haven't run out of combinations yet because there's
Mm.
such a finite number of notes and the way we put them together that that too tells you there's much more to it than just the notes and the timing and the
Mm. Yeah,
time signature.
I think in my case especially because I'm keeping it pretty simple most of the time. Not really doing many things that are that outside the norm, especially like with theory and stuff like that.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, sometimes you write a song, it's like, how did this not get written already? And some songs feel like they've always existed, just like some Bob Dylan songs, or like "Blowing in the Wind" feels like it was probably always blowing in the wind. Like,
Right. Yeah.
how
Good
does that
point.
person write that? It's just, or it just seems like it was always sung since the dawn of time.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a magical thing, man. And you're doing some magic with it.
Well, it's not all magic, but I'm glad you're focusing on the magic. There's always a lot of misfires, but that's part of what you have to do. It's
Yeah.
part of the job is going down a lot of dead ends. So yeah,
Uh,
no,
uh,
I'm really lucky. I've had a great run. I always noticed with musicians when I hire an orchestra in particular, you can hear when they're having fun.
mm,
And so I hope when people hear my music, they can see how much I'm enjoying making it.
mm. Well, I'm glad you say that too about it not always being magic because, yeah, we are definitely kind of romanticizing it a little bit, but I've never spoken to anybody in real life or in this podcast. Here you are, an award winning composer, and nobody ever says it's easy. It's still mysterious and challenging, and part of what makes it magical and why we get those magical moments is because of how challenging and just weird it is, because you can study it and get technical, but there's still something out there that we just, I don't know, that just comes through on a different wavelength.
Well, every time I hate it and I come up from my studio and into the light and see my family and my teenage daughters are studying for a calculus exam, I suddenly go, no, I'd rather do music. I'm good. I take
Yeah,
back what I said in the studio
right.
5 minutes ago.
Yeah,
So yeah, no, it's not to say it's easy, but there's nothing else I'd rather be doing for sure.
yeah, good problems to have, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Good frustrations. So can I ask you, do you like to send people any place for your work? I know I'm going to put your Instagram. I'll put links to Spotify, Apple Music, and things like that.
Yeah,
Anywhere else you want?
my catalog, it's amazing because Lioness season 2 soundtrack was released today. And I was looking at all these soundtracks on there. I thought, wow, that's crept up on me. There's a bunch there.
Mm.
So that's one of the good things about Spotify and Apple Music and this digital streaming. It's nice that that's all cataloged there. I like that. I really like I like documenting. Instagram is really my only social media, so I like kind of documenting what I'm doing and some of the recording adventures we go on with that. And and then just seeing the project. So much of the music is written for the combined experience of a visual and a music, an audio element together. So I'm always flattered when people respond to the music and go and see how it fits with the storytelling aspect of the other side of the job.
It's an amazing body of work, and no wonder you have people that will keep wanting to work with you, and showing up again and again to create some really special stuff. And
Well, I appreciate that. I am. This is going to sound like a soundbite, but I am so lucky the people I get to work with. I pinch myself getting to write music behind Morgan Freeman or Billy Bob Thornton or Demi Moore or any of these amazing actors. I feel really lucky to be trusted with that responsibility, and never take it for granted. So it's thank you for saying that.
Yeah. Well, and I also thank you for taking the time to talk and leaving me feeling inspired today.
So go mic that guitar, and then once you've recorded your the guitar on the wall, send me your song. I want to hear it.
Cool. Sounds good.
Right on. Thank you, Brian. Nice chatting with you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Music Production Podcast. If you want to help support the show, the best thing you can do is tell a friend, someone you think that would enjoy the show. I'd also love it if you could leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to support my work, you can go to brianfunk.com. I've got tons of Ableton Live packs, tutorials, samples. You can check out my book, The 5-Minute Music Producer, which gives you 365 short music-making activities to help you get started, stay inspired, and finish more music. And there's also the Music Production Club, where you get my latest releases as soon as they're finished. It gives you access to a community of like-minded people who are making music and sharing ideas. You can share your music, find new collaborators, and participate in our live meetings where we set up some kind of musical challenge and then make music together and share our results at the end. That's the Music Production Club. It's a lot of fun, and you can find that and everything that I do at brianfunk.com. Thanks again for listening to the show, and have a great day.